And good morning, everyone. I'm Michael Naylor, and I'm the director of the Enneagram, main Enneagram Center for Transformation and Well-Being. And today I'm interviewing a young Jedi, Ben Campbell, who is an Enneagram teacher, a colleague, and who founded the IEA Northeast, living here in Maine, and also uh, was it Wild Enneagram?
Yeah. Yep.
Yes. So you'll see his wildness come through as we have this conversation. But
Mm.
it's great to have you here, and just a pleasure to see you. You look healthy and well, and not at all anxious, which is great. We're type 6. But anyway,
Mm.
just maybe share a little bit about how you learned about the Enneagram, how it's evolved for you, what it means to you,
Yeah.
and along the way, you want to hear about both the IEA Northeast and the Wild Enneagram. So,
Sure.
so
Okay,
just
great.
jump right in there.
Yeah, I don't have any kind of plan, so let's see.
Sixes
First
like
it's just
plans, I've heard.
well, it's fun to be sitting here with you because you were my first one-on-one Enneagram mentor. I mean, I went through the Riso Hudson training,
Yeah,
and then worked with you for a while, which is really important for me at that stage. So fun
awesome.
to be here in a different context.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, I starting from the beginning, I learned the Enneagram from my mom, who's an Enneagram teacher herself. And I remember being like driving in a car somewhere, and she had the Wisdom of the Enneagram book, that blue book by
Hmm.
Riso Hudson, and she was just learning it, and she thought I was a 4. And she gave me the chapter. I was like 13. She gave me the book, and they have those quizzes at the beginning, and I read the big thing at the beginning of the 4, and I'm like, yeah, it kind of fits. And then I looked at the one for the 6, and I remember just like going through that and going like, yep, 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 yep. It all just fits super well.
Mm.
And so I had the Enneagram as a teenager, and I just remember it being, even though I wasn't doing a ton of like inner work at the time, it was really nice just to know that that there was this part of me that was a type, and that they were patterns, and that millions of other people had the same, what I thought of as craziness and anxiety that I did.
Mhm.
So it was kind of a relief to be like, okay, I might be crazy, but it's the same crazy that millions of other humans are. So
Yeah, awesome.
from early on, it was a really supportive thing. It helped with friendships in high school and college. And then um, I they were offering the training program at the Enneagram Institute right after my last year of college, and I really wanted to go and got some help to be able to afford to go, and went, and that was incredible. Um, and a few years after that, but I there was always the sense of like wanting to use the Enneagram or something similar to help consciousness. Um, and so I got certified. I started teaching some courses in my parents' basement in suburban Massachusetts.
Mm.
Like my siblings' friends would come over, and I just talked to them about the Enneagram.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And then really started to get established about 3 or 4 years ago. Had a couple courses online, and then in the past 2 years, it's really been figuring out like what's my niche in the Enneagram world. And I've been doing all this nature-based psychology and spirituality, and there doesn't seem to be a ton of that in the Enneagram world. Like I knew people who would do both, but it wasn't usually combined. So that's when I changed my business name to Wild Enneagram, and have been trying
Mm.
to grow that, focus on that since. Um,
Mm.
yeah, and in the past year as well. So that was, I formed that because I saw that as something missing in the Enneagram space. And then what I also saw missing in the Enneagram space was there was no chapter of the International Enneagram Association in our region that you and I are in, Michael. And
Mm.
I really wanted to build community. Like I knew you were here, and I knew my mom was there, and a few other scattered people here and there across New England, but like there
Mm.
have to be more than that. Where are they? So can we have a space for people to gather that's not like that's affordable, and that's not just affiliated with one person's style, that like brings in different Enneagram teachers from different backgrounds, and that's what we're trying to do. So
Beautiful.
that was a lightning recap of 14 or so years, 15 years.
Yeah, well, so I maybe it'd be interesting to hear about sort of the labyrinthian journey of through the patterns of the type 6. And so I mean,
Mm.
for you, what do you notice as have you noticed as being sort of challenging in an almost immortal way? It keeps showing up, or that you've had to really work on, and that and other sixes struggle with too. Anything you'd like to say about that?
Yeah, it seems that no matter um how like fundamentally okay I am, there's always this part of me that's convinced I'm not gonna be okay. So I've always been okay in the moment, but I'm always convinced I'm not gonna be okay.
Hmm.
And that can have lots of forms. Like it could have that's shown up in relationships. Like, okay, we're good today, but what about tomorrow? Like, I have enough money today, but what about tomorrow?
Hmm.
Or a year from now? And am I doing what I need to be doing right now to make sure that all these things are still okay in the future? And then I kind of miss what's going on
Hmm.
in the moment and
Hmm.
start to make decisions either impulsively or out of anxiety. And that might ironically sabotage the okayness that I was already in.
Yeah, yeah,
So that definitely perennially shows up.
yeah. Well, it's always good to have little friendly reminders of our personality patterns to keep us quite humble. Uh, how about in terms of just uh, how you experience and deal with different forms of anxiety? And that'd certainly be one where I'm worrying about I'm okay now, but I don't know tomorrow, and I start getting nervous. But how has anxiety sort of shown up in your life?
I remember it used to be ever present. Like when I was
Mm.
probably through to like being 17 or 18, just um pretty anxious kid, like scared of a lot. We'd come up with scenarios in my head, worst case things. Like some of that's still with me to some degree, but it shows up a lot less often,
Mhm.
and it's less compulsive. Like in some ways, it looks like OCD, or it's like a sixth representation of OCD, like needing to check the basement to make sure there's no bad guys in the basement,
Yeah.
or under the bed. Like that used to be everyday compulsive. Like I never knew what I was gonna do if I found a bad guy in the basement. Like I was probably screwed either way. If I really thought there was someone in there, I should run.
Mm.
Um, So like that can still show up in little ways if I'm like if I just watched a scary movie, or if my partner's not home and my dog barks at something that's not there, I'm like then it comes up. I'm like, oh no. And the visualization starts happening, and I'm
Oh,
like,
yeah,
what if someone snuck out while I was on a walk and they're there and they're down behind the
yeah.
dryer? Like that's still here. And
Hmm.
yes, once in a while I'll go check behind the dryer and there's never anybody there.
Yeah, yeah,
But more often than not these days, I can just be like, well, if there's someone behind the dryer, then I guess it's been a good run.
yeah. Well, it's like a, a useful warning signal that maybe doesn't focuses on a too widespread possibility of doom. My
Yeah.
mother-in-law was a six, and I can remember at Thanksgiving dinner, she suddenly said, "Never trap a rat in the bathroom." I said, "Thank you for sharing,
Interesting.
Grandma." I said, "Why?" He says, "Well, that rat will go for your neck and rip it out." I'm going, "What?
Wow.
Where did you get that?" I was on the internet. I'm going, "Okay, gang, just forget what you just heard. It's safe to go in the bathroom." But we would get warnings about things like that would just really, she want to keep us safe, right? So,
Right.
yeah. So, have there
Right.
been particular things that have helped you become less identified with those, the movie of what bad thing could happen? um, or has allowed you to, kind of absorb and work with the anxiety? I mean, what's been useful for you in this journey to not be so taken by it?
Mm. I'm I can't like put my finger on a specific practice or anything I was doing to
Hmm.
address it. I think it was just repeated awareness over years that like this is a this is a pattern. It's it automatically generates itself. And
Hmm.
starting to realize like when it this like this feels the same as it's always felt. Like this there's a certain experience in my body and the quality of scenario that plays out in my head that's consistent,
Hmm.
where if something real was happening and I needed to act, it's a it's a different thing. So like I can kind of see the pattern as not being in reality.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um,
Is that through sensation, or a feeling sense that you develop? You watched it enough times to go, that's the one that's not important, and then another kind of quality of inner sensation that says, hey, this might be something to think about.
hmm. It's like if there's something to actually go investigate, like if I hear a noise I haven't heard before, like I will just go check. It's like just moves right into. I don't sit in my bed like freaking out. I just go check it, and then it was just nothing.
Mm.
Um, and I think in those moments it feels more like there isn't actually fear. It's just I'm just gonna go
Mm.
see what's going on here. It's just kind of
Mhm.
curiosity, awareness, or
Mhm.
action.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah. Versus that like sense of paralysis and
Mhm.
like beating myself up for having the fear and then just trying to squash it and
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Well, I was just thinking that with sixes who I've been close to, it's like they have a radar for the moment. Uh, remember one person said, "At my very best, I can sense the four corners of the room
mm,
easily."
mm,
So it's like, I know one of my friends who ran a restaurant, he would just walk into a room and immediately sense if something was off in the
mm,
preparation and just walk to it. And he had like
mhm.
a radar that was very strong and often was accurate. Uh, do you notice that capacity in yourself from time to time when you're, in different situations? Has that intuitive sense been
Mm.
strong for you?
I don't relate to that way of it showing up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it does show up with people and disease.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
like I can tell pretty quickly when someone is feeling off.
Yeah, you sense it.
Um,
Yeah.
and there's an intuitive sense in conversation about where to go, whether it's with a friend or a client or something else.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, there's something off there. Let's go there, or let's not go there, depending.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Okay.
but not that spatial awareness sounds really fascinating. I kind of wish I had that, but
Mm-hmm.
haven't experienced that as of yet.
Mm-hmm. Best is yet to come, they say. So do you have a meditation practice or something, a mindfulness practice? Whether it's sitting or moving or anything that is helpful for you.
I try to do three things regularly. I sit every day, just about 5 or 6 minutes in the morning, and
Mm.
I try to always go outside and say good morning to the trees on my driveway. So that's
Mm-hmm.
part of my
Mm-hmm.
wild Enneagram practice or wild psyche practice.
Awesome.
Like to connect what I'm doing in the day to the other than human world. So that really grounds me. I don't get too caught up in like what do I need to do for myself? And it's more like, what am I doing today that's in service or connected or participating? Um, and when I remember, this kind of goes into the my blind spot sexual instinct. I do try to dance around in the kitchen or in my room to pop music, anything with a beat.
Mhm, mhm.
And moving that energy around in that blind spot way usually helps the other stuff calm down.
Awesome.
So those are three things I try to do.
Yeah, great, great. And so I would really love to hear about the wild Enneagram and how you're working with nature and utilizing Enneagram to facilitate that.
Yeah. I actually just this Sunday I taught a little Enneagram workshop at the main primitive skills school
Mm,
to my
cool.
friends there. And they're like the ones immersed in this nature-based stuff. So they were pretty riveted by how helpful the Enneagram was in that context. Um, because when they go out and because I'm thinking of this in two ways, like how does the Enneagram help us connect more with nature? How does nature help us in our journey with our type?
Mm,
The Enneagram helps with nature because like if I'm outside and I'm doing a like what they do at the school is they do a bird sit or they track animals, and a big part of is being still, is being present. And
mhm,
what takes us out of presence? It's type stuff. And it might with them, they're in a community up there too. So there's relationship stuff going on. Like there could be relationship trauma. There could be people they're trying to figure out. And when you
mm,
have all this like internal noise,
mm,
that scares away animals as much as physical noise does. Like they'll
mm,
pick up on your field and they'll flee. Like you're not going to hang out
mm.
with a bird if you go out there and you're chaotic.
Yeah.
And as
Mm,
we know, if we're practicing the Enneagram for a long time, it really can help increase our overall presence and decrease that overall chaos. So it
yeah.
makes it easier to reconnect with nature if we're practicing that. Um, so that's like half of it. And then the other half, when it comes to Enneagram work, is in many cases, I've found that doing some of the growth suggestions for types, like for me, the quiet mind and trust and stillness, sure, like, recommended awarenesses for the six, I find those really accessible when I'm out
Mm,
in the woods. So I'll go and do a sit, or I'll do a wander, or I'll share my anxieties with a tree or a pond or the sky.
yeah.
And I always find this profound sense of holding. Like that fear
Mm,
sixes have of there's no ground, there's nothing trustworthy, there's no orientation. I always
mm,
drop into that when I need it out there in a way that I can't always do in my living room or
yeah.
on my way to work or yeah. So, and other, there's different things in other types too. Like for the two, say it really goes a long way to challenge this idea that I have to be in a relationship with people to be fulfilled or that I have to be loving others.
Mhm,
um, to actually practice my relationships with non-humans
mhm,
is growing a different kind of muscle. Plus, it's an excuse to spend time with myself, and nature mirrors me. Like, if what I'm reading into the landscape is what's going on with me. So, if
mm,
I'm a two, it's a really great practice for like self curiosity, self nurturing, for
mm.
things I might not typically pay attention to.
That's awesome. Well, that's so much in line with Richard Rohr and the men's work that he developed with Illumin. And,
Yeah.
both I did 2 6-day workshops, and the foundation of it all was attunement to nature and the elements and
Mm,
really capturing the sacred wisdom of Native Americans and what they brought in and other Aboriginal tribes. And as Richard Rohr would say, you need to learn to be able to read nature as well as you read a book, and
mm,
that there's profound wisdom if you can, drop your busy mind and just be out there with nature in whatever form calls you. And I think that it seems to me, and I've talked to people over the years about, what's the meditation practice that works for you? And there's always, I'd say about 1/3 of the people say, if I just go into nature, everything quiets down. Somehow I feel a communion with myself and others, and so that's really powerful, and I'm excited that you're interweaving that because it's so incredibly important, particularly
Mm.
in this time. Um, so that said, like what is it that got you interested in sort of the path of understanding nature? Was there anything in particular? Was it a class or just a natural curiosity?
Um, at some point, I read the book Wild Mind by Bill Plotkin.
Yes. Hmm.
And then I went to a retreat with his organization, the Animas Valley Institute. And
Mm-hmm.
that was, I actually did that before I ever took an Enneagram class. And it was so powerful and connecting. Like being able to be in council with other humans and establish deep relationships that quickly with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And then to be out on the landscape, like singing to mountains and trees and weeping in the woods and
Mm-hmm.
running around like um, running around like a kid, like just that kind of carefree, like
Yeah.
jumping, bounding across the field. Like I remember coming back from that retreat and just being filled with this kind of animal aliveness,
Oh, beautiful.
like wanting to just like eat things with my bare hands and just like stand out in the rain, laughing kind of energy.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and it was yeah, it was super powerful. So I kind of apprenticed myself to them. I've been to a few of their programs and I've worked with an Animas Valley mentor for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that was like half of it, and then a couple of years ago, I was at I was up in Acadia National Park, in Maine, for anyone who doesn't know, and I had this experience with a cedar tree, in the winter. I was just wandering there, and I hardly knew what any kind of trees were, but I knew this was a cedar for some reason at the time. And I just sat under there and I'm like, I mean, fell in love sounds like a cheesy thing to say, but that was the experience of it. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
this is so, so precious.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to be able to be in better relationship with these other beings. Um, And so that experience, together with some pushing from my Animas Valley mentor, led me to the Maine primitive school, um,
Oh.
which turned out to be I thought I was going there to learn primitive skills. And what I ended up learning was a combination of primitive skills and presence in nature. I'm like,
Really?
wow, go figure. Um,
Huh.
so then I'm like I was, when I was first going there, like everything my teacher, name is also Michael,
Mm-hmm.
was saying was, I was like riveted. Like I haven't been that fascinated with what someone's saying since the first time I heard Russ Hudson speak.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone who's heard Russ Hudson speak for the first time, like that's something, right? Like there's some portals opening in the mind when you're
Yeah.
sitting there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the gist of that.
Mm. So the main primitive school,
Main Primitive Skills School,
school,
MPSS.
and
Yeah.
where is that located
It's up
besides
in
Maine?
Augusta.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
And well, that's interesting, exciting. Uh, okay. Well, so then say, if you would, say a little bit about your love and passion of the Enneagram,
Hmm.
whatever comes for you.
The Enneagram feels like the truest map of human nature that's out there. Um, like it just like verified over and over and over. Um, I've ex I don't think I would be doing what I'm doing without having encountered the Enneagram. I mean, obviously wouldn't be an Enneagram teacher without knowing about the Enneagram, but also just like this mode of being in my life where I decide to trust myself over and over and not go along with what society's telling me I need to do to be safe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I like credit the Enneagram with that sense and the ability to meet my psychological patterns that are coming up with curiosity and welcoming, as opposed to, at least more often, as opposed to frustration and not understanding. Um, just the clarity the Enneagram offers and the precise, kind invitations it offers me.
Mhm.
And then turning it around and teaching it and seeing how much my students change over just the course of like a year or 2 years in a weekly course
Mhm.
is like, how is that possible? And like from their own mouth, like different person than they were
Mhm.
at the beginning. And
Mhm.
seeing couples who join together who are having some tension, and then at the end they like actually understand each other, and they're like freely communicating and like doing so honestly and in front of the group. And it's just things like that happening over and over.
Yeah, awesome, awesome. Yeah, well, um, so as a evolving and growing being, carrying or living in the structure of the six, what would have helped you, or when you were younger, before you knew about the Enneagram, uh, and or what would your recommendation, hope for other sixes be, in terms of, if you have this pattern, and you know these are things I did to relax it, or anything that pops up as truths for you.
Mhm. I want to answer that. Also, what's coming up is what would help if you're a friend of a six.
Mhm.
When I is if you're a friend of a six, it's to kind of allow the figuring out to occur and to not question decisions I've arrived at.
Mhm.
Because if I arrive at a wrong decision, I'll figure that out eventually. Um, but someone saying like, once I've decided something, if they're like, "Are you sure?" I'm like, well, I was, but now I'm not.
That's
It
right.
just took me like 2 hours to get to that, at least. And now you're asking me if I'm sure. Well, that makes me think that you don't know how you feel about this idea. Now I think I need to reconsider. So I'm wanting everyone to approve of what I'm doing too.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it's like that self-doubt button can be pressed
yeah,
with something, which is, I'm familiar with it myself too, as a four. But so your recommendation is, don't inject doubt into.
yeah. Anything that feels like an "Are you sure?" Like any other
Mhm.
way of phrasing that, I just like keep that to yourself. If you have doubts, they're probably gonna figure it out.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, or asking questions to like help like okay. Um, this might be advice from my past self too, but in terms of verifying decisions, to rely on something that's not my head center to do that. Um, so like if I'm actually going to decide something, or if I have decided something, what is the feeling in my body there? Like, is there a relaxation?
Hmm.
Is there an easefulness around that? Is there just
Hmm.
this like sense of rightness?
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and to learn to trust that.
Hmm.
Because I've made decisions before where it turns out to have been a should. And whenever it's a should, there's this constriction and pressure.
Hmm.
And my head feels a little tighter, like it's being screwed into something, and like an
Hmm.
anxious focus.
Hmm.
And trying to make something happen that's not supposed to happen. Because it seems like a good idea, or this is the way other people do it. Um, yeah. So checking in with my body earlier
Hmm.
to
Awesome.
verify. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. So, any other suggestions for friends of sixes besides the one you've given? In terms of just maybe, because I think sometimes, because sixes can get caught up in worry, and all types can, but sixes can sometimes do it more intensely. And I think as someone who's living with a six, it's like I want to relieve their anxiety. So maybe
Mhm.
I start giving suggestions, or maybe, and which tends to make it even worse, right? Like, oh my God, now there's six things in my head rather than three. So what's been true for you?
I think I need to feel that that other person trusts where I will wind up. Like that there's just when I'm in my storminess, that there's some kind of ground over there that's okay. And I actually
Hmm.
think that seems to apply to my type 4 and type 8 friends too. Like when
Yeah.
those emotional, like the emotional realness types, when there's emotional storms going on, to just kind of
Hmm.
don't take them too seriously, weather it, it'll pass, and then I'll be good.
Yeah.
Like, don't jump into the mess with me to the best you can,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is easier said than done. I know, like with
Mm.
my friends and etc., who are some of those types, like it's very easy for me to just get in there and wrestle the demons with them, but it doesn't help anything.
Yeah. 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 Well, so one of the things that a lot of my six friends will say is that they can wrestle with this quality of self-doubt that seems to be connected to uh, what we call the amnesia of success. It's like I
Yeah,
forget the felt sense of my victory or accomplishment the day before, and here I am at this task again, and I'm going, oh my God, I don't know if I can do this, and it's almost like no memory for it. So
right.
what's been your experience?
That's definitely present. Um, Recently I've started trying to track my wins, so I have them written down.
Hmm.
Um, like having 3 successful client calls and then like one falls through and there's this like, oh crap, this is never gonna work, even though it was working 2 days ago. Um,
Right.
like to just stick by it. That's definitely a thing. I think with my own teaching, I've done that enough where I do trust that I can show up and what I need in that moment will come, or however it will unfold is how it's meant to unfold.
Hmm.
Started to trust that. I think I've had like supportive validation there too. Um, like, yeah, that was solid. That was good. Um, but there's certain areas where it's like, yeah, just this is a mess. This is never gonna work. And like right now, since I'm an entrepreneur trying to build a business and there's all this like livelihood question in there too, like the survival anxiety is getting all tangled up in there. And so my successes in that domain are diminished and the like those never feel like enough
Hmm.
compared to where I'm failing or not,
Hmm.
things aren't working out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're more, since the stakes are higher, there's a sort of intensification of the maybe the doubt or the
Right.
loss of confidence. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's interesting. This loss of confidence thing. I noticed that I taught for many years as a type six, and we would have these conversations like usually halfway through a 2-day workshop. Halfway, she'd say, I feel like I'm doing a terrible job. What's true? I said, I hear you. You're actually doing an awesome job. You're really present. You're really there. And she'll go, okay, I'll trust that. And then about halfway through, she'd just have this wave of self-doubt that would just
Yeah.
feel so visceral. And she'd go, oh my God, people must be thinking horrible things about me. And she was, doing great. Or she would come up to me and she'd say, I'm having this conversation in my head that you're mad at me. Are you mad at me? I said, No, I'm not. What's it about? And she'll say something about the events, and no, not at all. She says, well, I have to check that out because if I don't, that starts to live inside my head as he's mad at me. So, is that anything familiar for you in terms of any?
Oh yeah. 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 I was I was at a retreat a couple weekends ago with a um long-term teacher who I'd never met in person.
Hmm,
And yeah, I was there and I was thinking, I don't know if this person likes me.
that's a big one. Yes.
Um, I was pretty sure it was a projection.
Mhm.
But I talked to him about it and it was like that led to sweetness. Like the vulnerability led to sweetness. But if I hadn't been able to have that conversation, I'd just be like doubting myself and trying to be more likable or show up
Yeah,
differently,
sure.
which would have backfired.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's for sure. And then yesterday, just yesterday, I was doing a free talk, free wild Enneagram talk. And while I'm in the moment, I'm like, yeah, this is going really great. And then the moment I stopped the call, I'm like, that was terrible. Um, I don't think that went well at all. You know, I should have said this here and that there, and I was
Mm,
too vulnerable, or it wasn't organized, or blah blah blah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. Well, that's. I think fours and sixes kind of share that territory. In the moment, it's going great. At the end of it, I go, maybe I get really great feedback, and then I walk away and I go, oh, something is really bad about that. And thank God my wife's there, and she says, no, that was really great. That's just your inner critic who always shows up, especially if you've done a great job.
yeah.
So it's one of the demons. Um,
Ooh,
so
I really like what you just said. Always shows up, especially when you just did a great job.
yes,
Yeah, I gotta amplify that for any sixes listening or anybody.
yeah. Well, I notice when I've been at the height of some moment I've wanted to do well with. When I go to bed at night and I wake up in the morning, dread. It's like, oh no, that's the end. You know nothing, whatever the voice is, but it always shows up, and sort of that idea that whatever goes up always comes down. There's two ends of a stick,
Hmm.
and in the Gurdjieff work we talk about preparing for that. Because I often notice when I was at a training where I gave a training where I would just feel so deeply touched and filled with love and connection. And then I would come home, and a day later, I'd feel like I was in the abyss and so lonely I could barely speak. And I was
Yeah,
talking to my Gurdjieff teacher, and says, "Well, you got to plan for that. That's just what happens. It's just lawful. Don't try not to identify with it so much, but it's coming." And
right.
so just one of the awarenesses to have along the journey. So
Oh,
yeah. So another sort of interesting thing I've noticed. And we talked about in the training that we all did at the Enneagram Institute, this idea of with the type six, sometimes like you don't know which identity of the six is showing up. Are you the one who needs lots of support? Or are you the one who's angry and grumpy? Or are you the one who needs their independence? Don't glom onto me. Or are you the one that's saying, don't abandon me? And then you start to glom on me, and it's like, give me space, you're killing me. But kind of, uh, what is it? Don Riso said, anything you can say about the six, you can say the opposite, that there's this kind of strong polarity that they experience. So, what's been your
hmm.
experience of that polarizing energy?
Hearing you say all that out loud, I'm just like thinking about my loved ones and how annoying it must be to deal with me sometimes. Because those are all the examples you gave are true. Um, yeah, it's this funny push-pull in so many ways. I think sixes maybe exemplify this idea that we're um like bundles of opposites.
Mhm.
Like for example, I think everyone has this like balance between not wanting to be a show off, but actually really wanting to show off. Like,
Mhm,
and I
mhm. Yep.
I think sixes like demonstrate that. Like we're like living in one place and then we're in the other, and like I'm awesome and this is great, and then I'm like this is terrible and I'm so embarrassed, or like I am so attached and so in love with you and I just can't get enough of you right now, or like give me my space. I need 5 days by myself, please. Now.
Yeah.
Man, it must be so irritating.
Yeah. Well, and it
Um,
can be challenging to, I think force can have, it's similar, which is, I love you. Oh my God, you're my soulmate. Oh no, you're as ordinary as a stone on the road. I've made a terrible mistake. And then, oh no, you actually are awesome. And a day later, no, not today. It's a sad story, but sort of that swinging back and forth polarities, or oh, this person I met, he's amazing. Oh my God, he's just so full of himself. I can't stand him, but he's amazing, but he's not. And sort of that swinging back and forth. And I know for me, I used to take that as a signal that I should break up with a person.
right.
And my teacher would say, no, just wait it out. It will come around. Don't try not to build a cathedral to this stress you're experiencing, and just do something else. Don't over-identify with it. But it was hard for many many years. I could only last in a relationship for about a year because that pattern went out. So anyway, how are
Yep.
you navigating it these days?
Well, that's definitely a challenge. Having, I think the best thing my current mentor does for me is just like listen to all of that doubt and storminess and like the this isn't working outness and just be like, yep, sounds normal.
Yeah, no big deal.
You're good.
Yeah, you're good. It's
Don't
just
don't make any decisions about that based on that.
yeah,
You're
great.
fine.
That's
And
great.
that's been true over and over.
That's awesome. That's
And
good.
yeah, I like what you said too about do something else. Like put your energy something else, focus on something else.
Mhm.
Heard
Yeah.
a therapist recommended that if I'm starting to get caught up in some kind of mental cycle to just go do 5 push-ups
Get in your
for
body.
similar reason, probably.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well,
Maybe that's good advice for sixes too. If I'm afraid of a monster in the basement, just do 5 push-ups and then see if I'm still
yeah.
worked up about it.
See if it shifts. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and I think the other thing that I've noticed about sixes, it's that there's a, let's see, what would be, I was thinking of the levels of health in the type six, and the first level being something like the heroic pathfinder or something along those. But there's a and with sixes, there seems to be some kind of heroic journeyer in them, whether it's, Samwise Gamgee carrying Frodo to the mines of Mordor and dropping the ring off and going through all these terrible things. And, but there's a sense of taking on and facing into whatever the power is that is, hurting people. And I think of Michael Moore and all the movies he's done, and other type sixes, that sense of kind of a courageous, there's a courage I've noticed in sixes sometimes, like, they might be a little bit sort of a trembling spirit, and then all of a sudden an emergency occurs, and they become, this amazing force of courage and pure, focus, and handle the situation, and then come back to me and are just shaking all over the place. And I will say, oh my God, how did you do that? You were so clear and courageous. And so, sort of that, opposite polarity. Like, I'm just clear, I'm right there, there's danger, I can respond to it, I give everything I got. And then I think about it and I go, oh my God, how did I do that? But again, there's those particular things, any of them sort of stand out for you?
Hmm. Somewhat. I haven't had any major experiences. Like I've heard about some sixes, like being, I've heard Russ tell the story of a six on the it was in the World Trade Center when it got
Yes.
attacked and escaped.
Yeah. Yeah.
And similar stories. Um, so blessed in some way to have avoided major catastrophe so far, knock on wood. But there's little ways it shows up. Um, and that sense of like uh mm, like this task or this thing feels really big and someone else should probably be doing it, but they're not doing it. So I'll do it. Or like
Yeah.
I'm willing to do it.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of how I felt with starting this new chapter. Like
Mm-hmm.
it felt like a big gap. It's hard to understand why like New York City or Boston or any of these cities up here don't have a chapter. And I'm like, can I really do that? Um, but it felt really important. So I reached out and I ended up, support gathered around me. There was like Frodo with the fellowship, like
Yeah.
found some like-minded people to come along and didn't have
Mm-hmm.
to do it myself, but I got the thing started and was like willing to say yes to that. So, um, and I could have maybe before would have just like diminished myself and been that should be for somebody bigger or something
Mm-hmm.
to do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, it's also like just in small like everyday disasters, like if the power goes out, um, kind of just really calm, like, okay, what needs to happen here? And
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
like we've got all there's a preparedness that comes in, like having all the batteries and the lights and stuff like that just available. Um, having plans if we need to leave, like being sure that that's going to be easy and streamlined.
Yeah.
Um, and then the other thing is I just remember as a kid, playing neighborhood games at night, like Ghost in the Graveyard, if anyone's ever played that. It's just
What's it
like
called?
it's called Ghost in the Graveyard.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, there's people who are hiding, and then there's like others at a base, and you have to go out and try to find the ghost before the ghost gets you.
Mm-hmm.
And the ghosts don't have flashlights, like they're just hidden in the dark, so it's kind of frightening. But I was never scared in those situations because it felt like there were people, like I was one of the older kids in the neighborhood. And even though I was afraid of the dark and I was afraid of being startled, I wasn't afraid of wandering out because there was the sense of like, I'm protecting these other people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going to be the first to go out there and
Yeah.
I'll make sure it's safe for the little kids. Of
Yeah.
course it was safe, but
Yeah.
um yeah, I just remember that like it's easy to be brave when I'm being brave for
Other people.
someone else.
Yeah. Well, I think that's where, that term courageous pathfinder comes on in, sort of going in to the difficult areas on the behalf of other people that one cares about. And so it's ironic in some ways when my experience with the six, when they're really feeling healthy that and present, they have a lot of access to courage. And when they're not, it's the opposite. It's like I'm a
Hmm.
nervous wreck, but even out of that nervous wreckness, courage can come forward in the right situation, which is really quite interesting to observe. Um, and so, loss of confidence, one of the things one of my friends would say is when I have a loss of confidence, feels like confidence sort of drains out of my body, and I feel myself kind of stepping back from the situation. And I used to teach with somebody who was a type 6. When she was experiencing that, she would be at the front of the stage and she would talk and move back to the back of the stage as she was
Huh.
presenting. And she would then talk about it and say, yeah, when I feel that loss of confidence, I just find myself walking away. Uh, but do you have anything like that that you've noticed in yourself when you're feeling that loss of confidence in yourself?
Hmm. And if it shows up while I'm teaching, that's when I get flustered.
Hmm.
um, and suddenly start feeling like hot, like that kind of
Oh,
flush of,
yeah, yeah,
yeah. I mean, feels related to embarrassment. Like I was totally fine and confident, and now all of a sudden I'm a deer in the headlights, right in the middle of what I was saying.
yeah.
Um, when it's more just everyday moments, I'll be fine. And then there's this, maybe a doubt will come up, and it does feel like that. It's like it's sudden draining.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
or like getting the rug pulled out from under me, or like, and then this, like it's like a lot, like a wave or a loss of all at once. Like, why was I feeling so confident a few minutes ago? Like, this is a disaster. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's just noticing the kind of powerful internal shifts that can occur, the different feeling states that it's almost like they eliminate the moment that happened before. It's like it's always been this way. Uh, yeah, powerful, great to observe though, and at least you have a little bit of a chance of coming out of it or having some humor about it. So the other
Yeah.
thing I just wanted to touch on is this idea of for the type six that the idea I've noticed with type six is they at their very best they have what I would call a devoted heart. They,
Mhm.
they really devote themselves to people and causes that they care about. They don't give away their heart easily, but there's a deep compassion and loving kindness that sometimes doesn't. We say, well, six is a head type. Well, that heart is still very big and potent, and a quality of just I've got your back. If trouble comes, I've committed to you. I got your back, and if the Balrog shows up, I got your back.
Mhm.
So what have you experienced around that? What's been true for you around kind of devotion, loyalty, etc.?
Yeah, I love that word devotion. I sometimes use that word as an essence quality for
Yeah,
six. I don't know if it
yeah,
actually is, but
I think it is.
um, for me, that it's like a its core feels like a devotion to the like the world, or the present moment, like
Mm-hmm,
love of here, of being here, of wanting others to be here.
mm-hmm,
Um, I was thinking about my values for wild Enneagram, and devotion is one of them. And that what my most magical moments outside or with other people, or when that sense of devotion is flowing, like I'm with a client, like devoted to their awakening or to supporting them through what they're moving through. And if I'm out on a wander, like there's just this like sincerity too, like sincerity and devotion to,
mm-hmm,
I really want to be a good steward. Um,
mm-hmm. That's a great word, Stuart.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's when I feel most alive, most in love, most like that's what I'm here to be. And that's what I'm trying to inspire in other people, actually. Like I'm trying to help humans remember how to be devoted to life, and to the earth too.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that to me, devotion is a heart quality. It's to me, it's like a wish for communing with you and others and sharing it. And I think devotion really captures that. I think also of, in Buddhist practice, there's a whole practice where you go down on your hands and knees and you do kind of a supplication, but that supplication really is a devotion to the ideals of love and compassion
Hmm.
and caring for others. But it's a powerful quality, and it seems like in the six, it's like I have my eye out not just on my needs but on other people's needs too. There's more of a egalitarian sort of way of connecting,
Mm.
communing with people, which sometimes I think sixes are really awesome at, team building and bringing people together. And um, but
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, anything else you might want to say that we haven't talked about that's important to you before we close?
Hmm. Well, I want people to know they can join the Northeast chapter, although I don't know if that's what you meant by other things.
Yeah,
If
whatever's there.
it's, yeah,
And how do they do that?
enneagramnortheast.org.
Okay,
Pretty easy. Sign up for our newsletter. Actually, you are coming to speak for us. I don't know when this is coming out, but depending on when viewers are watching this, you can either sign up and see Michael live, or you can sign up and watch the recording, which will be up on our website. So
awesome,
those are all free for members, and membership is $50 a year, or there's a scholarship rate of $25 a year.
great.
Yeah.
And if someone was curious about sort of taking a movement into, you know, uh, path of nature and communing with nature, is there particular books that stand out for you?
Books, yeah. Anything by Bill Plotkin is great. Soulcraft, Wild Mind. If you're in Northeast, I'd also check out the Maine Primitive Skills School. And if you want to work with me, you can go to wildenneagram.com. And my current project is I'm trying to build a wild Enneagram village, which is a kind of like low-cost weekly program for Enneagram students who are interested in having a more nature-devoted
Hmm,
practice.
awesome.
So I'm soft launching that. There's not a hard start date, but it's going to be Thursday afternoons at 1 p.m. Eastern.
Mhm.
And I'm just trying to gather people who are interested. And once I have enough, I'm going to launch it. So yeah, you can email
Great.
ben@wildenneagram.com. Anyone who's curious about that.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for sharing your path and your story and your wisdom and your lessons. And
Mm,
yeah, just a pleasure to be with you, and looking forward to connecting in the future.
sounds good. Thanks,
Uh,
Michael. Really
yeah,
fun to chat with you today.
yeah, a pleasure to be with you. Uh,
Okay.
so let's see, I'll remember to turn this off. Where is it?